Presentation on bivariate correlations and Excel demos. This is Naomi Blow. So first, just a table of what we're going to go through. First, we would talk about what are correlations, then we would talk about why they are useful in analysis, then I will take you through a step-by-step visual how-to, and then I will play a recording of a real-time video demo. So first, what are bivariate correlations? Correlations tell us how two variables, x and y, linearly relate to each other, and we measure this by looking at the correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient has a range of -1 to +1 and shows if there is a positive or negative association between the two variables, and sometimes there is no association at all. We measure this by looking at two different things. First is the Pearson's correlation, otherwise known as the R value. This measures the extent to which there is a linear relationship between the two continuous variables. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it goes from a range of -1 to +1. So this just determines how weak or strong the association is linearly between the two variables. The p-value evaluates whether the coefficient is statistically significant. So to have statistical significance, it has to be less than 0.05 for p-value. If it is less than 0.05, you can claim that the two variables are significantly related. This is a graph that I got from the PowerPoint that we use that shows visually the R value represented. Like I mentioned, the closer it is to the absolute values of either -1 or +1, the stronger the relationship, as you can see visually represented with these scatter plots, the more defined line that is viewable. So why do we use correlations in analysis? So as we all know, correlation does not necessarily equal causation. So we are looking for variable association when we look at correlations. And by determining the relevant significance between the two variables, we can determine if there is a trend in the data that may hint at something else going on, what's causing these two things to be so related. Second is if the absolute value of the correlation coefficient reflects the strength of the relationship. So as we just saw with the scatter plots earlier, the stronger the relationship, the higher the R value. And higher just means closer to the absolute values of either -1 or +1. And finally, the null. The null is the assumption that there is no significant relationship. So by running a correlation, you can either accept or reject the null hypothesis. Accepting means that you have a p-value greater than 0.05, and you can accept the null because you have no significance. If you reject the null, you have a value that is 0.05 or less, and you can say that you have evidence to statistical significance. So now I will just go through a quick step-by-step guide using some pictures and descriptions on how to run the correlation in Excel for MacBook. So the first and easiest step, I think, is to select the Data tab from the top toolbar. And you want to make sure that you're selecting data in the Excel window and not from the toolbar that you have available all the time if you are using a MacBook. Second, you want to select the data analysis. This is found all the way to the right in the data tab. As you can see, they're circled in red. And once you do select the data analysis tool, it will come up with this window. In this window, you have a bunch of other analysis tools available if you're running different kinds of things. In this window, we will select the regression tool. And you might be thinking, why wouldn't we just select the correlation tool? It's right there. We select regression because the actual correlation does not provide a p-value, and we need that p-value to determine significance. So once you have selected regression, you can press OK. Pressing OK will bring up the next window, where you will need to put in your X and Y ranges, seen in that red square. What you do for this is you select either X or Y, and in this case, it doesn't matter which goes first. You will highlight your available data, and that will input the range for either X or Y. Once you have done that for both ranges, you can press OK. Pressing OK will create a new sheet at the bottom of your window. As you can see here, if it's the first time you're running this, it will say sheet 2 and not sheet 3. So that will be a separate sheet. Once you click on that separate sheet at the bottom, you will have all of this wonderful information available. This might look very confusing, but I tried to simplify it using arrows, circles. So we're going to start with the blue side over here. So the first thing that you want to look at is the multiple R. The multiple R is just your Pearson's R coefficient with those absolute values. So again, this is just the strength or weakness of the linear relationship. And to determine the direction, either positive or negative, you will look at the bottom coefficient frame where you can look at the sign, and that will tell you if it is either negative or positive. In this case, it is negative, so it has a slope downwards, and it is not a very strong relationship. Remember, it's either -1 or +1, and we are kind of nowhere near either of those. On the red side here, first you will find your p-value in two different places. You will find it under the significance F frame and in the p-value frame here. And though they are the same, we will be looking at the significance F to determine if there is statistical significance, because it's there on its own and easier to read and find. And again, if it is less than 0.05, it is significant. And as we can see here, this is quite far off from that. So for the correlation that I've just run, it is a weak linear relationship with a negative direction, and it is not statistically significant, so we would accept the null hypothesis. Now that I've just gone through that step by step, I will play a video recording to show you a real-time representation of running the correlation on Excel for MacBook. This is how to run a bivariate correlation on MacBook in Excel. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have this data tab selected. That will bring up the data analysis and analysis tools that you will need, which are found all the way to the right of the bar over here. We will select data analysis. This will come up with a bunch of different options for different things you can run for what you're looking for, but we are going to select regression. And the reason we select regression instead of correlation is because correlation does not give you a p-value, and regression does, and the p-value is what we need to determine statistical significance. So once you have selected regression, you can click OK, and it will ask you to input your Y and X ranges. To do this, you will simply come over to your data, and these are random numbers I have filled in for demonstration purposes, and you will highlight the range that you want to use. That's X, and in this case, it doesn't matter which is X and which is Y. And select for Y. If you have more data than just 10 frames, you would likely need to highlight your labels, and then you can click this labels button to assist with that process. Once you have inputted both of your ranges for X and Y, you can click OK. This will create a new sheet at the bottom of your Excel window where you can find the information on the regression. So because we did choose regression and not correlation, we get a lot of information that we don't necessarily need. The important things to look at here would be the multiple R. This is your Pearson's R coefficient. So that's this number. And this is just the strength or weakness of the relation between the data. And to determine the direction, you would look at the sign on under this coefficient frame. So this is a negative linear relationship. Next, you would find your p-value in two different places. It would be under significance f, which is here, and then this p-value frame here. To determine statistical significance, though, we will be looking just at this significance f. Statistical significance is anything 0.05 or less. And as we can see here, this is much more than that. So there is no statistical significance between people who like cats and people who like dogs. And that is how you run a bivariate correlation on MacBook for Excel. And that is all I have. Thank you.